My name is Brian Sullivan. I will call the Tuesday, December 2nd meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust to order. This meeting is being conducted via hybrid. We have some members present and some members online, so all votes will be taken by roll call. Check the members that are meeting online. You can't see everybody, but Shanta, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Great. And Forrest?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mary's here.
Oh, Mary, did you just come in?
I'm here too.
Yes.
Oh, hey, Abby.
Here.
Hi.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, good. I can't see everybody, so you need to keep track of hands and stuff. All right, with that, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda. Are there any edits, changes, or additions?
No, there's no edits or changes to the.
So move approval.
Okay. So I have a motion to approve from Brooke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mary by roll call. Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Mary Mack.
Aye.
Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
Abby De Molina.
Aye.
Forrest Bell.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. Item number 3, we have announcements. Who's taking announcements? Are you, Dylan?
Yes, I will. So the first is, and this is important for moving forward. This meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust is being audio and video recorded. Just announcing that. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, the EOHLC, approved the addition of the 28 units in Richmond Development's Meadows 1 to the town's subsidized housing inventory list, the SHI list. Municipalities' SHI lists are managed by EOHLC, and they are the Commonwealth's official record of towns and cities' affordable housing units. Municipalities must have 10% of their housing stock on the SHI list or be making incremental progress toward that goal to maintain local control over Chapter 40B developments. You can learn more about Chapter 40B, the SHI list, and Safe Harbor on the town's website, which is linked in the packet. And with this addition, we have moved from 6.55% to 7%. This fall, students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI, have been on island partnering with town departments and island organizations, including the housing department. Their final presentations are scheduled for next week, Tuesday, December 9th, from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. in the community room at 4 Fairgrounds Road. You are welcome to attend, and if you're unable to be there in person, the presentations will be broadcast on Nantucket Community Television and available on YouTube. There's a schedule of the presentations below. We have the group of students who partnered with the housing department here to present a preliminary presentation on their findings, and they will be presenting at 1:20 p.m. on the 9th for their final.
Great. Thank you, Dylan. Item number 4, we have public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public and or the board that want to make a comment as a member of the public? Are you guys checking the screen?
Yes, I believe there is somebody who wants to make.
Yeah, I think that's Nate.
Yes, hi Olivia. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for those who already participated in the study. My name is Olivia Arbuster, I'm a psychology grad student at Harvard. I'm the lead researcher for the Nantucket Center.
We're getting a lot of feedback.
Brian. There's some feedback.
Penny, I hear you. Maybe Penny, if you mute Olivia, there was a lot of feedback when you were speaking. Can you try again? Maybe better. Did we hear it? I didn't hear it.
I can hear the feedback.
I didn't hear feedback.
Now we can't hear you, Olivia.
Great, can you hear me now?
Yes.
There's a lot of feedback. No feedback?
Not here now.
Okay, good.
We're getting it.
It's not good, Penny?
No.
Maybe we're gonna mute on our end. Olivia, you can
It's
go ahead.
because you're not muted in the room.
Okay. Is it better now? Okay. All right. If it's not, just let me know. My name's Olivia Armbuster, and I'm a psychology grad student at Harvard. I'm the lead researcher for the Nantucket Study, which is an open online survey that is recruiting participants who are either past or present year-round residents, are over the age of 18, and are proficient in English. My study is interested in decision-making processes that are made by the year-round residents who live in seasonal resort communities. I'm hoping that I can recruit a minimum of 250 participants, and I'm close to that number, but still have a little ways to go before the study closes on December 15th. I will attach the study in the Zoom. If you have any questions for me, you can ask them. Thank you for having me today, and feel free to send this link to other year-round residents.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm going to ask just a couple of questions because I've seen your study and I'm familiar with what you're doing. Just to educate the public, you have an online survey that is blind. You're just looking for some information and you want to distribute this to as many people as possible. That's your goal today?
Yes. I have gotten quite a few. So I'm close to the 250 number. Trying to think what else. There's a QR code I've sent out, like hard copies to several businesses downtown and across the island. Because I can't divulge too much about the study until it closes after the 15th, I'm kind of limited to what I can say. But if you have questions, I can try to answer them.
Last question is, would you be willing to come and present the results of the study once it's completed?
Yes, that's my plan. Any opportunity to come back to the island.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here today. With that, any other public comment? Anything online? Anyone in the room? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. And you got a hand?
No, I'm just having them let me in the Zoom.
Oh, got it.
That's all right.
Moving away from public comment to item 5, approval of the minutes of November 18th. Review, comment, and or a motion to approve. Is there any member to make a motion to approve the?
Brian, I'll make
Thank you, Penny.
I'll second. This is Brooke.
Great. So I have a motion from Penny, a second from Brooke by roll call. Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Penny Dye,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
Forrest Bell,
Aye.
Mary Mack,
Aye.
and Abby De Molina.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Brian Sullivan's an aye. Moving to item 6, housing projects and programs. A, lease to locals update from placement. Is Colin here?
Yes.
Okay. So Colin, I'll turn over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chair Sullivan. Can you guys hear me all right?
Andy's here. Yes.
I think we just need you guys to be in the room. Thank you. That better, Penny? Christy? Okay, great. I have my Nantucket background on because I was supposed to be there, but inclement weather in Maine meant that I'm here virtually. But we will definitely come back. I'd also like to introduce Isaac Landman, who is joining from Placemate. He's been working on lease to locals programs and other programs for us for 3 years, and will be joining me and working on Nantucket. And today, the update I have was in collaboration with Ann Kutzpa from Housing Nantucket. So what we plan to do is go through a presentation on lease to locals, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and get into slideshow. Oops. Second. All right. So we'll go over some of the key program policies and changes we've made throughout this year. We'll talk about the marketing and results we saw from that, and then that'll kind of dovetail into the overall program results. We then want to share an update on where we are with the year 2 budget, and then talk about year 3 budget and what that could look like. And feel free to stop me anytime. If anybody has any questions, just jump in. We can have this be a collaborative discussion. I know you all pretty well, so I know there's certain things that you're interested in hearing more about, and I have answers, I think, for almost everything. And I think this is a really solid update, and we're in a really good place with the program. So first, I just want to remind everybody about the incentives and rent caps. So this kind of lays out what the incentive is per qualified tenant, maximum per property, and what the rent caps are. And then in July of 2025, you may all remember that we approved multi-year incentives. So what this allows for us is to market and try to attract owners that are interested in renting for multiple years by offering a step-down incentive at 100% for year one, 50% for year two, and 25% for year three. And I have an exciting update about how renewals have gone so far. This has been really well received. And so what we did in July after getting this approval is we marketed that. So this is kind of the marketing that we did. As an example, you can see on the postcard here, we talked about the total amount possible. And when we made in phone calls with property owners that are interested, we really tried to encourage them to think about this as a 3-year participation, even though it's not required. It was highly encouraged, and we're getting a lot of really good results from that so far. So our sort of marketing budget, which was funded with remaining Act Now CI funds, was postcards to second homeowners, digital ads in the current, digital and print ads in the Inky, and then a press release. So this is an example at the bottom of a postcard that would have been sent out to a second homeowner, just to show you what it looked like and to show you that. And then in terms of results, this year we've garnered 50 property owner leads. Our best channel continues to be postcards, which are about 50 cents each to send. And in our data and analysis over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years of running this program, we see about 25% of property owner leads end up converting. But many of these are interested in sort of 6+ months in the future. So you can imagine if you're a second homeowner and you get a postcard in the fall and you think about next summer and you might say, well, I've already got some bookings, so I'm going to do this a year from now, right? So it's a really long sales cycle. And we've talked about this before. So that's really why ongoing marketing efforts are important to kind of fill up the top of the funnel here and get people interested in the program. Our second most popular or sort of common channel is word of mouth, because people are talking about, hey, I've been doing this, you should do it too. And that's a really encouraging sign. We see that in most of our markets. That ends up being the top channel if we keep a program running for multiple years. So what have we seen overall? This is a combination of year one and year two. So we've done 44 total properties. We broke 100 total people housed with this program. 87 of them are qualified tenants. So the difference there is just whether it might be somebody who's unqualified because they work remotely. We don't pay for that incentive, but this sort of gap here just is explained by that. And the average monthly rent's been about $3,100 per month, and that's out to about $1,486 per bedroom. In terms of the household sizes, this is sort of a breakdown. You see a nice mix of sort of small and mid-size. So this is just a smattering of 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, 4 person, kind of a little bit of everything, but the most common being a 2-person household. And what that means in terms of unit size, number of bedrooms, is we're mostly seeing 2 and 3 bedroom units with some 1 bedroom, a smattering of room and shared homes, and just a few 4-bedroom units. So this is a combination, again, of all 44 properties. And then lastly, prior property use. This has stayed pretty consistent. Right around half, almost 60% of the properties are former seasonal rentals, monthly rentals, or short-term rentals. So kind of vacation rentals. And then a smattering of other things like empty second homes, someone converting a primary residence, recently purchased property, or new construction. And these are some of the feedbacks and results. It's a little bit to read. So I'll just read one of the property owner ones in the upper left here. Without the program, we would likely be working on shorter term rental. It has also helped us to keep rent at a more affordable rate for our wonderful year-round tenants that we don't want to lose due to inability to afford. So this is just a nice kind of smattering of positive things we've seen from property owners and tenants. We gather this both at the mid-year and year-end check-ins we do with the landlords and tenants as part of our compliance work. So these are really heartening to see, some good examples of people that are encouraged by the program on both sides, both tenants and property owners. In terms of renewals, so this is, I'm going to try to explain this in the easiest way possible because it's a little complex with the multi-year renewals. But if you remember, we did 22 properties in year one, and we offer a 50% renewal, and we expected that 80% of the property owners would take that and renew with their tenants or replace them with other qualified tenants. And so 17 out of the 22 did renew with that first incentive. We then have rolled that in and asked those 17 if they want to do another year or another renewal at the 25% incentive amount. And so far, 3 out of the 3 that we've asked have said yes, and 3 more are in progress. So we expect that, again, somewhere right around 80% of them will renew, just because at this point they're, really well committed, and our strategy of stepping down, seemingly has been working well. As we look at where we are with the current grant year 2, which started last September, we're at 22 units as well, and that would be eligible. And 1 is renewed so far, and 3 more in progress. So those will, sort of come into the, next year and beyond. In terms of our grant year, so this is, what we allocated in terms of incentive. We allocated on September 1st through December, or that should say December 31st. Sorry for the typo. Year 2 incentive budget was $550,000 total. Again, this is a little bit hard to read, but the sum I think is the most important thing, which is we've allocated 500,000 of that. We basically have 50,000 left, which is all essentially being allocated in the next 30 days. So we're in a really good spot in terms of having met our budget, and I'll show that on the next slide here. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, but again, the year 1 renewal number 2s, the year 2 renewal number 1s, and the year 2 incentive number 1s kind of all add up to right around 50,000. So, some of these might drop off or push into next year, but we have 50,000 left. We expect to spend right around 50,000. So again, really in a good place with the year 2 incentive budget as we kind of wrap up the calendar year and the end of the grant cycle. And what does it look like for next year? So this sort of shows, we've kind of shown this before as like a potential forecast. So if you kind of remind ourselves, we spent almost $400,000 on the first 22 properties for incentives. That was all funded by Act Now Community Initiatives. Where we're at today, we expect, again, by the end of the calendar year to have allocated and spent $556,000 and have 23 properties participating. So, we're really excited about that. And then for year 3, if we want to think about doing the same amount for next year, and this is where we're going to have the AHT weigh in here, would be 22 properties plus the renewals would add up to right around 550,000. So that's kind of where we're at with the budget. And in terms of next steps, Housing Nantucket is planning to provide a final grant report in early 2026. We're meeting this week to just kind of look at the rest of the submissions and get ready to prepare that final report together. I'd like today to ask for AHT to decide if they want to commit what we've forecasted. This is a recommendation that comes from staff as well. So Christy and Dylan and Isaac and I have been meeting to talk about this. And then as we're under contract to administer the Lease to Locals program directly with the town, we'll begin submitting incentive requests directly in 2026 and begin marketing for new properties as part of our administrative contract. And that's all I have. Just, quick short update. I'm happy to answer questions, go back to any slides, but I'll go ahead and mute and let people jump.
We can't hear you.
Go ahead, Penny.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Brian, to Colin. I have a comment and a question. My comment, it's interesting to see that the households, what constitutes a household, that over 60% of them are 1 or 2 person households, which actually supports our theory that we need more units that are smaller. So that's interesting to see that statistically proven. And then I have a question on page 9. You had a percentage for properties previously used seasonal, monthly, or short-term rental. Did you break down that slice of the pie? There you go, the big orange, the 25, into seasonal, monthly, or STR?
Yeah, we do have a breakdown. It's self-selected. People tell us whether they're renting monthly or seasonal. That's one bucket, or short-term rental. But typically, with our experience when probing with people, they kind of do a smattering of things. They'll do weekly, monthly, and nightly. And so we kind of bucket them all together in that case. So, if we wanted to dig in and find out exactly what their usage had been in the last, 12 months, we could. But I put them all in the sort of same category because that seems to be the pattern here and in our other markets as well.
Yeah, I understand that. But the premise of this entire program was to convert those properties that were working short-term, renting on a short-term basis. So at some point it would be helpful to know that. Thank you.
Sure.
More questions from board members? For those of you online, are we good with the feedback now? I think Dylan squared it away.
Forrest.
Forrest, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if I missed it. My internet connection is unstable. But does the year 2 or 3 budget allow for new properties, or is priority given to renewals rather than, enlisting new people into the program, new landlords into the program?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Forrest. You can kind of see it here. If we allocated this 550,000, the bulk of it would go to a first incentive for 22 new properties, up to, right? That would be kind of our cap. And if we decided we needed to go higher because we had so much interest, we could come back and ask for more. But yeah,
Colin,
there
we
would
lost
be.
you.
Oh, you got me now?
Is it us or him? It's him.
Forrest, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, yes, sorry. It was somehow like everything just cut out. So I didn't get that last part. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll try again. Can you guys hear me all right? Can I get a thumbs up? All right, great, thanks. So I think maybe I'll just start over. The 22 properties would be admitted with a budget of 337,000 for their first incentive, and then there would be 135,000 for renewal number 1 and 72,000 for renewal number 2, which is a blend of the sort of first and second year properties.
Colin, those numbers, is that assuming 100% renewal rate? Or are you only
80.
doing this 80% or 77%?
80%, just to be, reality. We don't need to over budget it and then come up short, where we want to hit the numbers that we expect.
Great. More questions from board members? Staff, did you want to address anything? Because Colin mentioned you guys have been chatting, wanted to talk about a future funding round. Do we want to do that now or a future meeting? Or
I'd say let's do it.
okay, so Brooke, your commentary is?
Well, I mean, I think the point is to authorize it now so the program, they can start marketing, right, Colin?
That'd be great.
Yeah. So I'm prepared to make a motion to authorize $550,000 for the continuation of lease to locals as outlined in the presentation.
Is there a second for discussion and or approval?
I'll second.
Second from Forrest. Any discussion? Vote by roll call. Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Forrest Bell.
Aye.
Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
Who else do we have? Abby De Molina.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
Mary Mack. Mary, are you on there? Is she on there?
I don't think she's on here anymore.
She dropped off. Okay, Brian Sullivan's and I will have Mary dropped off the meeting. Yeah, okay. Great, okay. Moving on to the second portion, rental preservation program study update from placement.
Okay, that's me again.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to look very similar format, but it's going to have some very different items. So what we want to talk about today is the program goals. So last time we came and presented, the idea was we would share a bit about what our rental preservation or rooted renters program looks like in other markets. We've since come in contract with the town, so we want to share what that consulting contract has looked like. It's sort of in 3 phases, so we're going to go through each of those and tell you where we are today and kind of what next steps look like to potentially bring a program to market in early next year. So if anybody has any questions, again, feel free to jump in and stop me. But there's a lot to go over today. We're really excited to work on this, and just wanted to reiterate that this has been a really collaborative team effort with Isaac from my team and Christy and Dylan kind of weighing in to shape this consulting contract. So as a background for those who are not familiar, the Rooted Renters Program or the Rental Preservation Program offers financial incentives to property owners who are committing to rent their properties to qualified local employee and tenants at an affordable rate for multiple years. The goal of these programs are to preserve long-term rental housing for local residents, support existing landlords who are renting to the local workforce, and expand the town's housing initiative through a multi-year cost-effective program. So we, Placemate, have some experience in doing this, and we've run 2 of these programs in Truckee, California and Ketchum, Idaho. Again, the town has contracted with us to do a sort of 3 to 12-month consulting contract. We think we're going to be able to wrap it up in about 3 months. This is the sort of breakdown of where we're at and where we'll be. So phase 1 was sort of our background, research, and validate. I think you guys gave an announcement about the survey we wanted to conduct. We're basically at the completion date of being done with that. Phase 2 is the define and design phase, where we build program guidelines and incentives. We expect to have that done and wrapped up before the end of the year. And then phase 3 is really building out the rest of the program, bringing program guidelines for the HC to review and marketing plan, and kind of get that ready for the program to launch. So we expect to have that done by the end of January. Aggressive timeline, because this has been the request of staff, just to be able to bring something to you. We think this is a really meaningful program that can have a fast and cost-effective dent in the rental market in a really good way by preserving existing rentals. So phase 1, which was our research and validate phase, we wanted to conduct some foundational research and do some stakeholder engagement. So what that looked like first was, let's look at the existing data sets we have for long-term rentals, determine who the program could serve or might serve, and determine, what is market rate, what is subsidized rental rate, what do we think about rentals on Nantucket that currently exist. So that's sort of the first portion of it. And the second portion was, as opposed to looking at data in the abstract, let's actually talk to long-term rental property owners and figure out their interest in a program, collect some data on who they're renting to, at what rate, for how long they've been doing it. So that's exactly what we did. So I'll start with phase 1, bullet 1 here, which is kind of the data review. We looked at town-owned property rentals. There's about 45 active of them. Housing Nantucket's rental properties, there's 62 of those. The recent housing needs assessment, Tacoma Green study, and the town Nantucket's STR working group data study. So tried to find some things, again, that would help us answer the question of, who could this serve? What does rental rates look like for places where that's been aggregated before? So this was probably the most, as we reviewed this with staff and dug into this data and spent time, this was probably the most kind of eye-opening. Was most of our existing rentals on the island for the housing needs assessment are at the 80% or below threshold. So there's 600 of them. But really, if you kind of circle around the 150 and below, that's the bulk of the rentals, right? So if 10% of the total housing stock is rentals, and we kind of slice that down, further, most of those are actually in the 150 or lower AMI, which is not unexpected because, as we know, the affordability gap is certainly still challenging at 175 and 240, but you have more opportunities for ownership at that level or obviously above. Whereas 150 and below, ownership is usually out of reach without, huge subsidies or other interventions. So this was really, I think the thing that struck us was that this was really where we may want to focus the program, as at the 150% AMI or lower. So on the right, you can see what the affordable monthly rent would be. That's kind of blended, I think, at the sort of 4-person household size. But then as we dug in a little bit more, just to kind of get a sense of, what would market rate look like, what we really found out was there is no good data set on what market rate is. So this is a good chart, I think, just to kind of ground yourself in unit size, how many people might be in that unit, what 100% AMI rents would look like, or what 150% AMI rents would look like. So just as an example, if you remember the Lease to Locals rent caps we were just talking about a second ago, they essentially are, right around the 100% AMI. But, if we think about what we hear anecdotally on Nantucket, a 3-bedroom running for $5,600 may actually be even considered a deal in today's market, right? If you can even find it. And so I think the aha for us was really, we don't know what market rate is, but we know that it's extremely high. And so if we go back to this chart here and what people are making and what they could, potentially afford, we want to try to find those rentals that are probably even lower than 100% AMI if possible, and prioritize those. So, that's going to be a bit of what we do in the sort of program definition phase and restrictions we might have on income. But in terms of who we would potentially want to serve, we want to find those people that are, really at or below 100% AMI with these rental rates. So that's phase one, sort of first portion of it. The next was, let's actually go ahead and talk to existing landlords, send a survey out. What we wanted to accomplish with that was, let's figure out the number of years that they're currently long-term renting, the unit sizes and types, how big the units are they single family homes, are they ADUs, what rental rate they're currently charging, and then cut that by unit size, figure out the number of years they might be interested in participating in a rental preservation program. So we sort of tease that out with them. And then, how long they might want to also be involved, so what the amount would be and how many years they might want to participate. And then garner their interest. Are they interested in participating after learning about this program? And then we also got some open-ended feedback and questions that helped us, with the things that people might want to figure out before they sign up for a program like this. So our goal was to receive 30 responses. It was open November 6th and closed November 20th, so about 2 weeks. Here are distribution channels. We sent it out to Placemate's database of existing landlords that were not qualified for lease to locals because they're already long-term renting. There's about 30 of them. And then these are the rest of the sort of agencies. Dylan helped spearhead a lot of this. And what it looked like for us was that we got a couple social media posts. So the town posted one, Housing in Nantucket posted one. Here's an example of the email that we sent, and sent kind of, multiple reminders to those property owners. And again, our goal was to have 30 people respond, and we kind of blew that out of the water. So we're really pleased to announce we had over 100 total responses. Not everyone finished the survey completely, and some were disqualified. So this sort of shows the breakdown. 61 partially completed responses, meaning they got through at least page 2. There's 3 pages total. 48 completed the response, completely completed the survey, and there was a 45% response rate. So that was really high, and we're really encouraged by that. 25 were disqualified because they're not currently landlords, existing landlords. So I'm going to go through each of the questions and kind of slice it and share things. There's some interesting stuff in here. So if anybody wants to jump in, Dylan or Christy, if you have anything you want to add, or Isaac from my team, feel free to add any insights that you saw on this and you want to share. But I'll keep jugging along. So the first question was, are you currently renting your property around tenants? Again, 25 bounced out because they said no, but 81 proceeded. So they got, brought to the next page after we asked the kind of, basic first name, last name, email, that kind of thing. This is a breakdown of those 61 that moved forward, or I should say 61 moved forward and answered this question, which was what size. It's mostly full single family homes, right around 40%, but you can see kind of a smattering. The others were mostly people that just didn't understand maybe what an ADU was, so they would write in something like, it's a back cottage, and they didn't read the fine print, which is totally fair. So most of the other was detached or attached ADUs. Had some condos and a little bit of everything here. Not too many private rooms and shared homes, which kind of makes sense, I think. In terms of unit sizes, a lot of one bedrooms. Penny, to your point earlier, it's really good to see that a lot of probably the back cottages and basement apartments are being rented out here and captured in the survey, but also good smattering of 3-bedroom homes. So of the 61 people, here's the breakdown, or 31% were 3 bedrooms. Next slide shows kind of where they were. So I tried to do a somewhat anonymized, that we asked for the address, and this is self-reported, but most of the properties were located in Mid-Island, downtown. So that was, I think, from staff's perspective, this seemed what we might expect and encouraging. In terms of what you're charging for rent, the minimum was $800, the maximum was $8,500. The median, which is probably the most important if you look at all 61, was $2,850. So we think about what, I'm just going to actually go back for a second and remind us, if we look at, affordable monthly rate on average for 80% AMI was $3,270. So these are well below, and definitely well below market rate. So I'm just going to go back to the slide. We were able to slice it by unit size, and actually this is the probably easier way to show it, is that you can see that the 1 bedrooms are well below 100% AMI in terms of rental rate. The 2 bedrooms are also well below, and then you get a little closer to the 3 and 4 bedrooms being right at 100% AMI. And so, yeah, that was just good data for us to kind of collect in terms of what we were seeing by the current rental rate of these existing landlords. How long they've been renting. So the 61 people that wrote, the median was 8, and then for total, and for with your existing tenants was 4. So these are landlords that have been doing this for a long time, which was great to see. The next question was, to your knowledge, are your tenants locally employed? And almost everybody said yes, so that was great. That didn't disqualify you from continuing, but it was a thing we wanted to know if people were renting to remote workers or renting, somebody that wasn't locally employed. And then we asked them the question of, this was the sort of stimulus we gave them. The rental preservation provides existing landlords with an annual financial incentive in addition to the rent they charge. And we asked people, if you were to participate in this, how many years would be interested in participating? And the median was 5. So I think that makes sense. If you've been renting for 4 years to your existing tenants and you think about how long you might want to continue renting to them if they wanted to stay with you, they said 5. If you've been renting overall for 8 years as a median, then that also kind of matches as well. The next one was, we asked the question of, we want to give you an annual incentive. What would it look like on an annual basis for you to participate in this program? So the median was right around 6,000. And we had a range of 1 to 10,000. We don't want to have that open-ended and have people pick, some giant number. And this was kind of, I think, sort of to be expected. I thought people would probably pick around 5,000, right in the middle, but 6,000 was right around the median. And then the next one was, this is sort of a breakdown to make it easier by unit size. So this is what people said the average annual subsidy indicated by unit size. So 1 bedroom was $6,200, 2 bedrooms $6,400, 3 bedrooms $6,045, and 4 bedrooms $6,500. So again, all of them right around the $6,000, $6,500 mark, somewhere between there. If we compare that to the average rent charge, so we were able to kind of look at, the 1 bedrooms were charging $2,000 a month. We wanted to kind of look at what would your total amount you would be getting per month or per year if you got a subsidy on top of that. So I'll give you an example of the 1 bedroom. If you indicated that you'd want $6,260 a year, that'd be $520 a month. So the total collected per month would be $2,534. And then you can kind of see that for each of these, right? And it's, again, right around $500 on top of the rent per month over a multi-year period, right? Whatever we determine that multi-year looks like. So the affordable rents, the AMI, this is kind of a way to kind of say, okay, where would they be at in terms of that total rent collected versus what the AMI is for 100% rental rate. So the 1 and 2 bedrooms are still below 100% AMI, even with $500 a month as an incentive on top. And then the 3 and 4 bedrooms are, somewhere in that 110 to 115 range. Just wanted to kind of give that for context to show that that $500 a month doesn't push them up to the 150% AMI or anywhere close to market rate. These would still be well below market rate, even with the $500 a month subsidy. But obviously the landlords are interested in this, and this would be well received and provide some stability for both the renters and the homeowners. So we think that, that 6,500 is really a good number to kind of think about as what the incentive could look like, maybe regardless of unit size. So then in terms of, we're down to 50 people who have kind of got to the very last question, which is how likely are you to want to participate in this program? And 86% said they were likely or very likely. So that's very encouraging, because if you add those up, we've got 43 people that are interested in this just out of the gates. That's a really great sort of beginning place to start. If we wanted to launch a program, these are the people we would talk to first, right? 43 people saying, I would want to do this at these terms. And as long as we weren't wildly different from what they submitted, I think a lot of them would participate. And, great to know that there's that many people kind of in the wings waiting for it. In terms of the kind of qualitative open-ended, there were questions around how would the program be funded. I think some people were confused on whether they would be able to use their existing tenants, or would we have to, provide the tenants for them. There was a question about whether this was taxable income. And then, again, similar questions. What's a qualified household? Can I keep my existing tenants? Several people submitted where they had multiple properties. So they were asking the question, can I only qualify for one unit, or could I do multiple units? Right? I think that's a really important thing we have to think about in shaping this program. And then another question about where the money comes from. So before I shift gears, that's sort of the end of the phase one, the survey and the research. Are there any questions, anything I want to go back to before I jump into the next phase of the consulting project?
Colin, I have a question related to the AMI levels and the max rents. Do those include expenses like utilities? Or exclude that? Because
usually
those are normally bulked in as a housing expense, so I just want to understand how high it's pushing somebody.
Right. When we asked the landlords, we didn't ask them that question, are you including utilities or not? Some landlords will include certain aspects of it, but I would assume this probably does not include utilities. So for the tenant, to your point, if I was renting a one bedroom at $2,000 a month on average, certainly I'm paying more for all the utilities that go with living in that unit as well. We could definitely add that in as a requirement one way or the other for the program in the future if we wanted to.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand that for your assumptions on 100%, 150%, whether utilities are included, because some of those numbers do start to creep high.
Yeah, that I don't know. If we go back to, so this was collected from the housing needs assessment. Dylan or Christy, I don't know if you know if this maximum affordable rent, I think it does not include it, but I don't actually know.
Okay, I think that Anne, when she calculates these figures, it's included. So I just want to make sure we're doing an apples to apples comparison. Penny, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that this people who can participate in this are people who are already doing this, right?
Well, we haven't set program guidelines yet, but that is our assumption. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, if I could just jump in, Chair. The intent behind this was to preserve existing rentals. So it is to encourage people who are already renting, whereas lease to locals is a conversion of people who are not renting to start renting year round.
Brooke?
I just thought it was interesting that the dollar amount of the incentive at the different unit sizes wasn't all that different.
Right.
I just find that curious.
And it's also interesting that that dollar amount is significantly lower than the conversion amount.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. I'm actually really encouraged by it, because it feels like we could answer that question from community members of, I'm doing the right thing. Is there something for me?
Right, how do you support me?
Because I've been doing it for years.
Right.
And that they're not expecting a ton of money for that. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were encouraged by that too. As we kind of crafted this same program in Ketchum, Idaho, and Truckee, California, we did similar surveys, and certainly the kind of difference in unit size is usually more apparent, and so it was kind of surprise for us that they were right around the same, and they were right around 6,000, 65, somewhere between 6,000 and 6,500. So that was interesting for us too.
Abby?
I guess just on that point, Brooke, I do think it's interesting, but I guess maybe it helps understand the argument of some of the people who, with the smaller units, might be needing to do it because it truly is helping them afford being able to keep whatever that is, that property, right? And so that's why there wouldn't be like a huge gap, because maybe the people who have the larger units don't necessarily need to like break even, if you will, but the people at the lower end of the spectrum might. So that's why they might still need that theoretically higher subsidy. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
That comment makes me curious about the ownership time based on bedroom count. Are the smaller units newer owners versus the larger units older owners have a smaller basis?
That's a good question, Brian, because that might help us understand that. Because are people renting it to be able to afford to keep that property, right?
Yeah, we can definitely look at the data. So let me just make sure I understand the question, Brian, that you want to know, and Abby as well. So if we can look at how many years you've been renting as a one bedroom versus a two versus a three versus a four, just to see, instead of, we know that the average, go back to this, average was 9.9 years across the board. If we can slice that by unit size for both, probably just for, how long you've been doing it in total would be most useful, right?
I think it's more ownership history versus renting history.
Got it. We didn't ask that in this survey.
Yeah, that just establishes basis sort of on a market median level of purchase price, so then you can assume a debt level.
Well,
yeah. Well,
I think we'd need both though, right? Because then, Brian, we could know like, hey, I bought this property 10 years ago. I've been renting it the whole time. Or I bought this property, making it up, 20 years ago. I've only been renting it for 5 years. Maybe there's some sort of financial reason why I need to rent it. Because
Right.
I think it will help to prove or disprove. Some people will say like, oh, all these people buy up these properties just so they can short-term rent them or rent them out. But if the data isn't really showing that, it will be helpful to know.
And it might help people preserve ownership longer if the subsidy is there to keep them in year-round inventory.
As we design the program too, that's definitely something we can ask is, when did you, we'll know the address. So it's public record. We can see when they purchased it and for what amount. So we could do that dive. And I also, since I have all the addresses of these 61 properties, I could look at through the service we use, Property Radar, I could look at ownership, and I can do that cut. It would take me a little while, but that I think would be a meaningful thing to try to figure out, to your point, guys, like how long have you owned the property? We can see loan history.
How long have you rented it?
And then compare that to how long you rented it, and just see if there's a delta there. And then also, kind of understand the carrying costs, because Abby, to your point, it might be the 3 and 4 bedroom units are owned outright, and they are really just trying to cover their property taxes. So that explains why $500 a month is enough for them. They're like, oh, that I get rewarded. Whereas the 1 bedroom might be a back cottage for a property purchased 3 years ago, and they're just really trying to make it work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Colin, I think to your point, it would also help us tease out the nuance. If someone has owned a property a long time and then they suddenly start renting it, is it because like their insurance has suddenly doubled, and something like that? Like being able to understand the reasons why people might start renting as well. Because like, could it be that there is an older homeowner who might be in this situation that the only way they can afford to keep their property is for them to be able to rent? And then in that case, you're proving that this program is a great way to help local homeowners keep their properties without having to sell and just move on. You know what I mean?
And just one delineation that Christy flagged a second ago: if someone was just starting to rent, let's say their property taxes or their insurance costs spiked, at least a local program would be the option of, let's get you to not have to sell it and first starting renting for the first time. But to your point, we could look at how long you've been renting and kind of figure out, like, is there sort of a sweet spot for those landlords, and what's their motivation? So I think I can take away the two asks between Chair Sullivan and Abby on what you guys are looking for. And when I review with staff next time we come back, we can give an update on what we saw from those 61. Just, it won't be perfect, but it might be a good read of, okay, the 1 bedroom units have been owned for this long and rented this long and have this much kind of carrying cost or percentage of, loan still left versus the 2, 3, 4. It'll be a little bit of a data exercise, but I think it will be worthy.
Yeah, I think it would just be helpful. Thank you, Colin. That would be great.
Okay.
Brian?
Go ahead, Brian.
It'll also help us as we're crafting a program, how to market it,
Right.
to whom we should be marketing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Great. Thank you, Colin.
Okay,
Any more
I'm going to keep going.
questions? Okay, seeing none, keep going.
All right, great. So then phase 2, this is where it gets exciting. We start to define the program guardrails, what the incentives could look like, and a budget. So the goal of this phase, which again should be completed by the end of the year, and where we're having you guys weigh in today, would be, let's define, who this is for in terms of the qualified household and tenant. And we've got some sort of conversation starters today to get you guys to weigh in on that. And then we would define property owner eligibility and prioritization. So, we expect that we wouldn't have infinite funds for this. We have to figure out both who's eligible and who's not, and then how do we prioritize the people that would be interested in this program. So we've got some thoughts on how to do that. And then determine budget and goals for the number of properties we preserved. If we're looking to launch this early next year, we want to have some guardrails on how much budget we want to put forward into building a program. And then lastly, defining the incentive structure, amounts, and payout schedule. So first, and this is kind of jumping then into the program guardrails, this is similar in terms of the way Lease to Locals is structured, is that we want to make sure the property is located on Nantucket. And then Penny, to address your question, the property must have been an existing year-round rental for at least the past 12 months. So one thing that was flagged by staff was just making sure that we're lining up the definition of year-round rental, living in the property 10 out of the last 12 months. Our recommendation also would be that one property per ownership group would be allowed to participate with the pilot program. If this is the direction that AHG agrees with, we don't want one landlord taking up, sort of a lot of the potential pilot budget we have. And then lastly, the way we've done prioritization in other markets for rooted renters programs is to have an application period, have people apply, tell us what their rental rate is, and then sort them based on affordability. So again, if there's a limited amount of budget available for a program and we're offering, X number of dollars per year, we can kind of get a sense of, all right, how many properties can we admit? And let's have a sort of top to down based on affordability. That's our recommendation. This is sort of staff and placement coming together and looking at our other rooted renters programs and kind of giving you a guardrail on the property side of things. Any questions on that or any feedback, concerns? We can come back to it obviously too. All right, keep going.
Please.
And the idea is, while they are existing tenancies, we want to see a new lease signed with the current tenants at the current rental rate. So we don't want people, kind of signing up and then jacking up the rent right out of the gates because they're locking them in for 3 years. So again, like lock in your rent. We would allow an allowable rent increase in future years, sort of year 2, year 3, and that's to be determined. So, staff and placement will come back with a recommendation on that, or you guys can weigh in on it now. With Lease to Locals, it was a 5% increase every year. That may not be warranted here. But again, the idea is you want landlords to feel like they can feel comfortable going into the program. And then, our initial thought was the incentive is based on the bedroom count and paid in increasing payments over multiple years. Would it be 3 years, 5 years, right? There's some administrative burden if we're doing this program, beyond what we typically do, which is a 3-year program, but certainly could be done, or it could be done, sort of on a rolling yearly basis. But we want to have some number of years we commit to the landlords out of the gates. So here, the kind of key details are, we'd want them to sign a 12-month lease to be able to engage in the program. If they're month to month or they're on a lease, they need to kind of commit to a 12-month minimum. And then again, we're trying to get them to participate for multiple years. So there would be a new lease every year signed to show that they're in compliance with the program. And as I mentioned before, the current rental rate should be preserved. You would be allowed an increased rental rate of some percent, we decide. And then I'm leaving some of these open because we don't know yet, right? We just have early read on the data and want to get you guys to weigh in as well. But it would be paid out in X number of installments over X number of years, right? Is it paid out at a little bit at year 1, a certain percent, and then it increases over time? Is it flat year to year? That's all kind of to be determined. And, based on our other experience, we like the idea of kind of a ballooning payment where you give them a little bit in the beginning and then it gets increasingly bigger as they participate longer to kind of encourage them to stay in the program for multiple years. And then in terms of the tenant, what we would need to do is determine what the AMI for the household can be. We know that restrictions on the trust of what they are today, but, we may decide that's 175, 150, we have to determine that. And then we have to determine what makes a qualified year-round employee or tenant rather. So this is what we have for Lease to Locals, which seems to make sense, and we'd recommend continuing that. One other key indicator, I think, indication here, and this is kind of in our experience in our other markets, is that while we do want the same tenants to obviously stay as long as possible, there are times where a tenant would leave, but we want to make sure that if they are replaced, that the household and the tenant stay qualified, right? So if a new tenant comes in and they bump up the qualified household income, then the landlord will no longer be eligible. So we just kind of encourage the landlord and tenant to have conversations if any tenants need to be replaced. And if the tenant group leaves fully, they can be replaced, but a new tenant group has to qualify for the program. Again, be income qualified and have, one thing I glossed over is half of the adult tenants as qualified tenants. You want to make sure that since you're not paying this by qualified tenant, but rather by either unit size or some dollar amount per unit, you want to make sure those units are occupied by people that are working locally. Again, all of this is sort of our experience in other markets. I'll keep going. We can come back to this unless anybody has any questions. All right. So we modeled out a little bit of what kind of some budget scenarios would look like. I think, Brooke, to your point, it's encouraging that we didn't see a huge change in unit size. So we just modeled it out saying, okay, if we offered 6,500 per year, and that would look like, if we did 20 units, that would be an incentive cost of about $130,000 per year, or $390 total. Based on our lease to locals participation number of people, it's been about 2.14. So we expect that would continue to house about 44 people. And then if you kind of do that math of the 390,000 divided by the 2982, the cost per person houses 2982. That stays flat across all of them because it's it's the same proportion. But just to give you an indication of potential financial commitment, if you wanted to preserve 25 units and continue to house 55 people, it would cost $487,000. If you wanted to house 65 people and 30 units, it'd be $585,000. Again, if you pick these exact numbers, it might change. We might decide to go up or down, but just kind of give you a ballpark of the sort of 400,000 to 600,000 range of the 20 to 30 units.
Colin, the number of units was higher though, wasn't it? Like 41? That said,
we definitely have higher. Certainly, I think there may be some people that drop off, right, of those 41, but and also, we opened the survey for 2 weeks, right? We didn't reach everybody, right? There's 1,000 landlords long-term landlords on Nantucket, or maybe 1,000 units, and maybe there's 700 landlords on Nantucket, right? So I think, not to say that you could spend infinite amounts of money and house and, preserve all of the long-term rentals on Nantucket, but in Truckee, for example, our budget was $500,000 for 25 units and year one, and then we did $1 million for 50 units in year two. Their incentives were a little bit higher, but ultimately, I think this could be a good starting point if you wanted to say, okay, let's see if we can get 30 in the first pilot phase, and spend $600,000 or $580,000 plus cost of marketing and administering this program as well.
Did you spend through it in Truckee in year two?
We have, yeah. We have and Isaac, feel free to jump in here. Isaac's running the Rooted Renters program in Truckee. I think we have budget for maybe one or two properties. We opened the second cohort up in August, and Isaac, there's just a couple that are a couple $1,000s left, right?
Yeah, applications. And also, hi everyone, I'm Isaac Landon. I don't think I've met this group before. I've been working for Placemate for the past 3 years and helped to design the Rooted Renters program when we first launched it in Truckee. But yes, the applications for the Rooted Renters program in Truckee are ongoing. I believe we actually allocated our final grant to a property that we're still working on the application with. So if all of the properties in our pipeline go through, at this point, we will have spent everything. We anticipate to spend all of the budget. It's a long-winded answer.
Great. Thank you, Isaac.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just keep going, and then we'll have a chance to kind of go back to any of these slides when I finish the presentation fully. The last phase, which we'll do in January, would be deliver program guidelines, prepare the program for a pilot launch, which would include, what the marketing would look like. Brooke, to your point, to kind of dig into the data a bit more and figure out if, once we've determined the incentives, who do we think that's going to go for, and try to make sure we talk to them. and then build out the application process, including that prioritization framework. So yeah, the hope is that we can complete that by the end of January and come back to you guys, sort of maybe the last meeting in January for the AHT. So my hope was for the rest of this meeting today is answer any questions you have. I'm just like with Lisa Locals program, we can flip through slides. And then if we can at least get some guidance today on, budget, that can help us. When we come back next time, we can probably ask for a motion to allocate budget for the incentives. And then our hope again would be to come back at the end of January and present the final phase of the program, which would be, more defined program guidelines in terms of what the actual incentive amount is going to be. How many years do we want to have participation? All of that, what's the AMI for the household, all of that stuff. So that's the end of my kind of presentation. Again, I'm happy to flip around any slides, take any questions, or I can, unshare my screen and we can just have a conversation.
Great, thank you, Colin. Any members of the board with questions?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I find it interesting the way we're putting the pieces of the puzzle together for different homeowners with different situations, right? So with the deed restriction buy down program, which is a permanent deed restriction for substantially more money, is going to be attractive to some people. I'm a person who long-term rents, right? My tenant moved in before I moved in the house. It's been 13 years. Obviously I can't participate, but I'm not ready to put a permanent deed restriction, but I certainly might be interested in doing this, right, in my situation. And then obviously the lease to locals is sort of I've been short-term renting, and I have worries about year-round renting and what that means for me, and having this vetting process for tenants and all of that. And so that we're trying to address different homeowner desires, needs, motivations it's really exciting to me that we're creating a puzzle that is adding units, preserving units in some combination, and actually fairly cost effectively, I think. I mean, I know these numbers look huge, but when you look at the creation of a new unit, permanent unit at well over $700,000 now, it's to get 30 long-term rentals for less than the investment in a permanent one unit,
right,
feels good to me. So anyway, that's all, just more commentary.
Thank you, Brooke. Any other members online? No? Coming to budget guidance, I think, Colin, will you take the screen down just so we can see the other members? I'd look to staff, to Christy and or Dylan to kind of lead us through that aspect. I don't know where our buckets are and what our opportunities look like.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to thank Colin and Isaac. It's been an interesting process working with them on this and kind of getting this together. As you saw, Colin has laid out in the presentation in the slide deck, helpful budget guidance, kind of laying out what the prices per unit and how that would be parsed out over the year. I think we as staff would be interested to hear where the trust is at in terms of, I think we got a sense from Brooke, but hearing more about what members are thinking about in terms of the value and the numbers that they're seeing.
My personal opinion is it is an inexpensive amount, as Brooke pointed out, and I wouldn't want to fund the program for any less than achieving who was surveyed, that they would be interested in participating. I would ultimately want to see anybody that wanted to participate be able to be funded. My expectation is once word is out that that's an opportunity, it would probably exceed that 41. And so would we want to look to the select board to go above that? I'd rather have extra money unused. I guess my question for staff in the finance department is where are we allocating this money from overall, and if it's in a first year commitment, do we have the opportunity to continue that in year 2, 3, 4, 5, and are we accounting for that appropriately?
I would just
Christy.
Christy has her hand raised, but I also just want to add, I don't think, and Colin, you should correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're looking for an official motion today necessarily, but just more information, right, on to guide as they come back before the January. But I think through you, that Christy has her hand raised.
Christy, back to you.
Thank you. So this funding would come out of our $6.5 million cash override. Would not be bonded funds because it's not a long-term, investment in real estate or property. So with that, we do have lease locals coming out of that and some construction subsidies. So I think the trust would need to set a number that they'd want to have, and then we would put that in our budget moving forward. But we feel comfortable with what's been proposed from Colin and Isaac, and we can also play with some numbers if you wanted to go up. But I said this to Colin, and I'll say it to the trust. I think we have to define what success looks like and target a number, and then we can model that. But just saying the dollar amount without saying how many actual units we want to accomplish, I think we want to set what we want our result to be, and then we can backtrack from there.
Thank you, Christy. So that personally, that it's concerning to me that it can't be bonded funds, because then that means it's expensive to using bonded funds, right? So if $500,000 on debt service equates to what value if it was bonded, and how are we using it? So personally, I'd like to see a table of what's the difference to your point, in unit creation of $500,000 towards this program versus $500,000 of debt service bonded over 20 years. What's that work out to be for other unit costs? I guess I just need to understand that personally.
I think at staff we can
table that out.
Table that, yeah.
Okay. Other members with questions or comments? Okay, with seeing that, I'm realizing we have a long agenda based on this presentation and a handful more things to go. Colin, do you have any more, and Isaac, for us today before we jump to the next item?
Nope. Thank you for your time. We'll be back in about, maybe a month and a half.
Awesome. These are great presentations today. And you're right. There were a lot of exciting data points that have come out of your work so far. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Y'all.
Dylan, are you taking on Good Landlord?
I am. I'm going to share my screen.
So the next item on the agenda is the Good Landlord tax exemption opportunity.
Okay, so everybody can see. Okay, so we spoke about this last time at the November 18th trust meeting. Since then, I've had the opportunity to meet with Rob Rainey, the assessor, and to speak with Brian Turbot, the municipal finance director, about this. And we are hoping to bring a more full proposal for a select board sponsored warrant article tomorrow night at the select board. So I can kind of run back through an overview.
And that's for this spring's town meeting.
For a 2026 town meeting. It would not be implemented until fiscal year 28, so it would be approved at this year's town meeting, but not really go into effect for another year. But
so that's June of 28.
Yeah, July.
July of 28.
But we don't necessarily have to get into that weeds. But for anybody who wasn't here last time, the Good Landlord tax exemption is an exemption program that the town can opt into, and then people can qualify so long as they're renting at affordable rate. They're renting their property at affordable rates to year-round residents within a restricted rate, and to the residents who are income qualified. So that's basically the background. And there are 5 steps that we spoke about last time that the town needs to determine. And so that's what we're hoping to get the guidance from you, from the trust on, which is maximum amount of the exemption, the annual occupant household income limit, affordable housing rate of rent, the domiciliary requirements of the owner, if any, and any other restrictions or regulations consistent with the intent of the law. So based on our meetings with Provincetown, Harwich, Rob, Brian, and our meeting last week with you, the memo in the packet, in which I'll walk us through, lays out what our recommendations would be, and we want to get confirmation from the trust that you all agree. So first is that the maximum exemption would be for rented space 500 square feet or less, you get $1,000. 500 square feet or more, you get $1,500. Having it in these buckets this is modeled after Harwich. Brian and Rob agree these are the right amounts, and having it in these buckets like allows them to forecast out, right? So Brian, for example, and I'll talk about this in a minute, recommended having a cap of 60 annual exemptions. So they would know that at most $90,000 is being exempted from property taxes, right? Somewhere between 60 and 90,000 if 60 people are full. So it allows them to forecast out. The next is setting an annual occupant household income limit at 120% area median income. I'm going to talk more about that in 1 second. And the third being affordable housing rate at 80% area median income. So we want to pair those numbers because it's a more restricted rental limit, right? So 80% can afford it, but you leave it open to a broader swath of the population at 120% AMI. So you create more housing that people can afford, and you leave it open to people in that range, if that makes sense. So that would be our recommendation. We do not think that there should be a domiciliary requirement.
I'm sorry, your recommendation is 120%, not 80.
So 120% would be the income limit,
right?
But 80% is the AMI rent limit.
Okay, got it.
Right, so it allows people who are making more to still be eligible, and they can then save and possibly find, other housing, homeownership in the future. We do not believe that there should be a domiciliary, if I'm saying that correctly, requirement. Part of the impetus for the program is making it so that people who are seasonal residents will be incentivized to rent out their homes to year-round tenants at affordable rates. So we don't think that folks should have to be living on island year-round to be eligible. And then the open-ended one, we have a number of recommendations. So Brian, at the suggestion of Brian Turbo, we would recommend a 60 person cap, a cap of 60 annual exemptions. We do not believe that there should be a limit on the number of properties people can be eligible for. At least in the initial rollout for the first year, we think people should be allowed to have, if they have multiple properties that they're renting within the guidelines, they should be eligible at all those properties. Of course, that would count towards the 60 person cap, though, or 60 exemption cap. Our recommendation would be to allow multiple exemptions. So, for example, we have the HERO Act, so veterans are eligible for certain property exemptions too. We would recommend that they be allowed to stack them. There is a minimum amount of property tax you have to pay no matter what, so it wouldn't wipe out their property tax bill entirely, and the assessor's office agreed with that. And then lastly, for units that are already deed restricted, so for example, what Sparks have, we would recommend that only owner-occupied units would be eligible for this exemption. So commercial developers, residential commercial developers would not be eligible for the exemption that way.
How can an owner-occupied unit be eligible if it's rented out year-round to somebody that's not the owner?
If they rented a room.
Okay.
A
So that's
hosted stay,
that's a subset.
It would be a subset, yeah.
Okay.
That way to say, like, if, well, like with Tacoma Green going up, for example, all of those are income restricted and some have year-round restrictions, right? So this would say those can't qualify because those are all rental units. So they're not owner occupied also.
Would a house that on the presentation we just saw in Rooted Renters qualify?
It could.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's what we're saying. It's our idea that they should be. I mean, it's a little different because Rooted Renters is not a tax exemption, obviously, but we think that the idea is to stack these things, create the puzzle, and to incentivize as much as possible. So we would recommend allowing that.
With only 60 units being potentially available, and an owner having multiple opportunities, there are some owners that have 30 or 40 year-round rentals today. Is it kind of whoever applies for all of them gets them, or if you have multiple, you go to the bottom of the line until
that's something
on your second or third unit?
That's something we would want feedback from the trust on. They'd have to apply individually for each property.
Right.
So we're a little suspect that we would see that kind of mass application. And from the perspective of incentivizing this kind of housing, we would theoretically be okay with that. I think if we saw, holy cow, we got 120 applicants and people are getting boxed out, and now, and because somebody who owns multiple properties got in their application first, one person's getting all the exemptions, then that would be something we could reconsider, but we do want the trust's recommendation or input on that. I believe Penny has her hand.
Yeah, Penny raised her hand. Go ahead, Penny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Dylan. Was there any discussion with Rob, Randy, or anybody else about how to treat an exemption if it's only part of a property, if it's a cottage basement?
So this is why we want the maximum. We're having the exemption be just based on square footage. So if the space that's being rented is 500 square feet, so that square footage is about not the size of the unit or the property itself, but the space that's actually being rented.
So it's not about the definition or the type of property. It has nothing to do with whether it's a primary, secondary, ADU, tertiary.
No.
Okay. And then
I was just going to say again, it's about kind of simplifying that out that way for the assessor and for Brian Turbot. They can, calculate out the impact on the rest of the town and everything else.
Okay. I understand and support what you explained for items 2, which is the 120% AMI for the household limit, and also the calculating the monthly rate of rent at the 80% below. I believe that will create more opportunities. I am not in support of limiting it to 60 units. I would like to understand the rationale behind that. Why arbitrarily 60? Why not 100 or 50 or 200?
Good question. So this was, through you, Mr. Chair, this was at the recommendation of Brian Turbot. Harwich has launched, so the first place, the place that the statewide bill is based off of is Provincetown. Harwich is the first, at least Cape community, to implement the law that was, to accept the state law that as it was passed in 2023. They have an annual exemption limit of 30. And they saw within the first, I want to say 4 or 5 months, 5 or 6 applications. So 60 is just kind of a guardrail. That way, if the popularity of the program is much more extensive than we expected, then suddenly it's not having a much larger impact on the town's finances or the tax, the property tax. But that's basically the idea behind it, is to just have some guardrail in place. But we don't really anticipate reaching that 60.
So let me just finish. Follow up. So Dylan, just for people's information, this is a program that we're allowed to do under the seasonal communities designation, right?
No, it was actually passed as part of a different law and act to improve the Commonwealth's competitiveness, affordability, and equity in 2023.
Okay. That's
so it's
helpful.
actually independent of seasonal communities.
Okay, so I would suggest if we're going to support something like this with a limitation, whatever that may be, and we have some time to discuss and decide on that, that rather than, I think we're going to have to couch it as a pilot program. I just think that would be very prudent, rather than saying 60 and having 200 people apply and having to tell the majority of people, no, that's not a work for you.
I'm in agreement with you, Penny, and I guess my question on the limit is it going to take a vote of town meeting to make the adjustment? Is this limit in the warrant article, or can it be managed on an annual basis through this board and or select board? So can we make that adjustment? I'd hate to go to the voters and say we're going to give you this opportunity for exemption and then say no to more than half of the applicants.
But I think what we're dealing, it's like an algebraic equation where we don't know what X or Y is, which is the demand. And we also don't know quantitatively what the impact is. To Brooke's point that she made at the last meeting, this money, it comes from somewhere. You take away some property tax income and there's a hole that needs to be filled from elsewhere.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, the select board can change the amount. I think that staff are in favor of the idea of a pilot program, that idea, launching it that way. Part of the reason that we met with Rob and with Brian was to discuss where these funds are coming from, and they were saying that the 1,000 to 1,500, 60,000 or 90,000, if it maxed out at let's just say, for example, you implemented it with the 60 cap, that would just be a drop in the bucket, that it wouldn't be felt. They don't have concerns about the way that would be redistributed or the impact on
Okay, but then to take that a step further, excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, there's a level of commitment that needs to be made to this if we're going to give it a fair shot. at having a chance at success, right?
Agreed. Go ahead, Brooke.
So sorry I had to step out for a minute, but so basically the program design is a draft. What we're actually asking town meeting is to give us the permission to design and implement, right? And the parameters of the program are, as I understand it, amendable over time, right?
Without going to town meeting.
I think so. I think we opt in.
Okay.
And then we have the option to implement the program. But I guess one of the questions I asked Dylan is, the law says that once you opt in, you have to stay in the program for 3 years, but it doesn't say you have to stay in at these particular parameters. I think they're adjustable. We're not asking town meeting to approve the details. We're asking them to grant permission
to opt in,
to decide on the details and to implement a program. I just want to make sure, yeah, and if that's the case, if we have flexibility, we could, if it's not working for some unexpected reason, reduce the number of properties, right? Or have some fall off or whatever. And then if this proves to be a disaster of some kind, then we go back to town meeting and opt out. But opting in doesn't mean we have to do it. It just gives us permission to do it, as I understand it.
And if I may, I think that, we'll be talking about this at the select board tomorrow, but not necessary. I don't mean to represent that it'll be like the final. It needs to be decided today from you guys, and that it will be decided tomorrow at select board. This is all very helpful to know, to continue to do research on it and bring it to this select board and continue to flesh out the program.
Okay. Personally, I'd like to see the number 60 go up, or the potential of the number 60 to go up, because I think that there will be more demand in the community, and I'd hate to turn people away. I wouldn't like to see one owner come in and take any more than one if there's a single owner behind them, right? So I'd like to see some flushing system that single owners have the opportunity to take exemptions prior to multiple owners taking more. But
I don't see why we couldn't have as part of the other restrictions or regulations that if you've already applied and been approved for one, if there's anybody else with an active application, you have to wait.
It needs to be reviewed prior to.
The thing is, it would be rolling, right? People would apply throughout the fiscal year, so it would be hard to say, like, we have to see if we reach the point, but we could set the restriction
time period, 3 months.
Yeah, or even like if there's no active applications, then
right.
We'll consider it. Would be my recommendation.
Christy?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to make a few additional comments. Sorry, I'm just trying to lower my hand. I hear all the concerns that are being raised, and as I feel like I say at every meeting, is we're adding new tools to our toolbox. And I think something really specific about this is the eligibility criteria is that they need to be renting at 80% of AMI or below. And while I would love to see 200 applicants at that, I don't think the reality is that a lot of people are renting at that amount. And I personally don't think that $80,000 tax abatement would make you reduce your monthly rate to that level if you were charging more than that. So it's just another tool, as we said, and I think Harwich that Dylan spoke with, they've had a few applicants. I think it's another tool, another incentive that we can explore. Is this something that works? Does tax abatements work on Nantucket? And we can collect that data in a pilot program. But I think looking at Colin's data on who's already renting year round, what their rental rates are, I think that 80% AMI is actually going to be a pretty hard target for existing landlords to meet. And in terms of people with multiple dwellings, we could also look at parameters around perhaps if there's multiple applications on one parcel. So if they have a primary and a secondary, or they're renting 3 rooms in their house, could they get 3 abatements? So I think there's a lot of things that we could parcel out as we're going through this, but we wanted to have the trust provide feedback to provide to the select board to get it on this warrant, because the trust and staff has been working on this for about 18 months to get it to a town meeting for that initial sign off, and then we have time to work through the nuances. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Any other comments from members of the board? So it sounds like there's general support to get it to the opt-in space at the select board tomorrow night and work out the bugs. Okay.
Thank you.
With that, let's jump to the next item. Item 7. Rachel Freeman, Executive Director of the Land Bank, is here. Welcome, Rachel.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Sully.
Either way.
Air Sullivan.
That sounds funny. How do you want to start?
Thank you so much. I have a presentation, so I would love to share my screen if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. First of all, I want to just say thank you so much for having me today. And I wanted to just reiterate my goals for today's presentation. I am very excited to be speaking to the Affordable Housing Trust, and this comes from, or at least was initiated from, an invite to go to the Vineyard and meet with the Island Housing Trust and the Martha's Vineyard Land Trust and sit down to see what had been happening on the Vineyard and how those two groups had been collaborating in particular. And I learned just an immense amount of information on that trip, and I've been trying to bring it back into practice on Nantucket. And I think I guess what I'd like to say is that I just had I really appreciate our collaboration, particularly with Christy and Dylan and the Affordable Housing Trust in general. Everyone's teaching me a lot about affordable housing, and I think that's truly how we start to discover how organizations can work together, is by fully understanding the capacity of each individual organization. And so without further ado, I'm going to hit on 3 main points today. One, I'm going to go over a little bit of background about the land bank, and maybe that's not news to everyone, but I'm always surprised how much misinformation there is out there in the world. So I'm just going to go through some quick facts. And then I want to provide some thoughts on the Martha's Vineyard trip and some things that stood out to me on that day in particular. And then some ideas and opportunities for collaboration that I've thought through and that the Land Bank Commission has thought through. And, some of them seem obvious to me, but nonetheless, I think it's important to put them out there. And, we only generate ideas by putting out ideas and collaborating and discussing them. And so this is just another opportunity for that. So I want to thank you so much. And I will start off by telling everyone that the land bank is actually part of county government. So we're public. This is like one of the biggest things that nobody knows. We're not a private nonprofit. So we actually fall under the executive branch of state government at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And if you look through this org chart, you find, and this is not the whole org chart, but if you parse through it, basically you find things like the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, which is, we abbreviate EEA. Interestingly enough, what EOHLC, or the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, I believe is buried in here as well. So this is where these departments live, and the land bank is actually overseen by EEA, which is a little known fact. We deal most often with Kurt Gertner at EEA, and they are our governing body, basically. From that governing body, we have legislation known as the Land Bank Act, which basically has a series of rules, I'll say, or components, sections of the act, which we have to adhere to. Within there, there's also rules and regulations for taking in transfers. And then locally, the commissioners create individual policies on any sort of policy, major policy issue that they feel like is worth addressing and just having something standardized for. There's 5 publicly elected commissioners. They have 5-year terms, which is pretty long for a public term, and there's unlimited terms, so there's no term limits for people. Right now we have 5 commissioners, and 3 of the 5 have been on for an extensive amount of time. What else? I already went through that we're governed by the EEA. I have yet to, well, I do know what it means, but I just cannot fathom the term body politic. When people say, what are you? Technically, we're a body politic. We are publicly funded by a transfer fee. This is not a tax, it's a fee. The Land Bank has about 24 staff currently, and those are mostly year-round staff at this point. This is also interesting to me. We house about 49 year-round employees and their families, so that's a cumulative number, and up to 24 seasonal staff in approximately 21 units on land bank property. And the land bank owns approximately, we're a little bit below, but approximately 3,500 acres of land, which it does not make us the largest landholder on the island. The Conservation Foundation is the largest landholder on the island. And so from that basis of information, you know, I went to Martha's Vineyard and thought quite a bit about the way that the islands were different. And when I was asked to sort of have this discussion about my thoughts on the Martha's Vineyard trip, I have to admit that the first thing that stood out to me is the difference between the islands. And I know that should be a no-brainer. I mean, it's obvious, right, to all of us. But I think I just wanted to point out a few of the things that really stood out to me. So we have actually, interestingly enough, about the same population as Martha's Vineyard. I mean, these are all approximates, right? These numbers, but we have about the same population. It seems like their population grows a little bit larger than ours in the summer, but they're almost twice, the island itself is almost twice as large as Nantucket in terms of square miles. One thing that I find fascinating is that they really seem to dislike the fact that they have 6 towns, whereas sometimes I dislike the fact that we have 1 town. So I think it's, you know, there's pros and cons for both ways. And they have obviously multiple select boards because of their multiple towns, whereas we have 1. This is a major difference to me, is their regional planning commission is the Martha's Vineyard Commission. And I've spent a fair amount of time trying to understand exactly what the Martha's Vineyard Commission does. And it's actually fascinating to me, their role throughout the island. And we have the NPEDC, which is also the Regional Planning Commission on Nantucket. I put these numbers down below, the 40-30-30 and 50-40 for the 2 islands, as, I mean, I kind of made these up to some degree, but I think they give us a point for discussion. So apparently Martha's Vineyard is approximately 40% conserved, 30% developed, and 30% undeveloped and not conserved. So they have 3 numbers. You know, you could, I put ours as 50-40, you could be 55-45. I don't know, our 3rd number is really small, and we all know that, right? It almost doesn't exist. So I think that's a huge difference in the 2 islands that stood out to me. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw there. And what we looked at were these, well, we looked at a number of different housing collaborations. But both, I will tell you, both, one was developed in 2007 and one was in 2015. And both were collaborations where the Island Housing Trust was looking for to build housing in an area, and they found a location where it probably exceeded their needs. And so the land bank was able to collaborate and to some degree buy down the price, and yet also hold open space adjacent to somewhat of a densely developed area. It varied throughout the locations as to, the type of style of housing, the mechanism, where they owned, where they ground leases. But it seems like that this has been something that they've been doing for a period of time now, which is a bit of a newer development on Nantucket. And I don't think that the land bank and the affordable housing groups have been collaborating in that way for years. So I think it really provides an opportunity for the groups to work together and to look for places and pieces of land where this is possible. The thing that I think is going to be hard is I think it's going to be harder to find them here. That doesn't mean I don't think they exist. And that doesn't mean it's not worth looking. I think those collaborations are unique, and I think we should have our eyes on the prize as opportunities to work together. So I think that was my overview on the Martha's Vineyard trip. And what I wanted to go into next was really what I see as sort of the gamut of opportunities for collaboration between the land bank and housing organizations on Nantucket. And as I said a moment ago, collaborative property purchases are really the ideal. I think it's just a really unique setup, and if we can find opportunities like we saw in the Vineyard, that would be amazing. And I think it's something that hopefully we can really hone in on some interesting ones. But in the background, I think there's a lot of other ways that we could be looking to collaborate. And I also want to mention that I don't think this is an exhaustive list. Like I said, I'm still learning. I think I can almost tell you, I'm for sure there's opportunities that aren't on here, which I'm really open-minded to hearing what other people think, and whether they think I've missed something obvious and or less obvious. But just to go through them quickly, one of the mechanisms that we talked about in the Vineyard that I think is something we could do here is conservation restrictions. And what's unique about conservation restrictions, or some form of restriction, is that it would allow the housing entity to retain the land so that there's no issues with square footage for development, or maybe a septic ends up under the conservation restriction, but we're able to basically reserve the land for open space in some way while not restricting the other areas of the property for use. So we're not actually carving off half of it and owning half of it. The thing that I did want to say, and I worry a little bit about with conservation restrictions, and this might just be me overthinking this, but I've been trying to think through the pros and the cons of conservation restriction, and the pros are obviously immediate, and that the land bank could pay, and the commission is open-minded to paying basically per acre property values for conservation restrictions, which offsets the property cost to any sort of affordable housing entity or any sort of housing entity. The con is that while there's an immediate benefit financially and may be the only mechanism for making things affordable, the con is that it's somewhat permanent. And so from a planning perspective, I really want to be thinking through, are these areas that we're open-minded to, is this the right answer for this area? Because, over time, say it becomes that lot can actually be developed and makes sense to be developed more densely. is there a mechanism for undoing that? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? So it's a bit of that permanence that I'm thinking through with conservation restrictions. In terms of a housing transfer fee, we are strongly advocating for the housing transfer fee and are happy to do any sort of administrative support or the full administration of a housing transfer fee if it was approved. I think one of the things that's interesting is, again, sort of becoming aware of how much we are renting year round at below market rates to land bank and municipal employees. I think this is something that you spent a lot of time talking about today. So that was interesting. And we will continue to do this. We only end up being able to rent to municipal employees when we have overflow housing, but it is something that we're happy to do and feel like it's a benefit. I think last but not least is considering subsidized reuse and or relocation of existing housing. And I said with a year-round deed restriction, and I'm not sure if that is really the right terminology, but basically some facet there or some function that would make this dedicated housing for year-round community members. And I think the Land Bank Commission has become very open-minded to that. And one of the areas that they're really leaning in is the buildings that are on 41 Jefferson, where it was very important when the property was first built, knowing that much of the value of that property was actually physically in the buildings because they're incredibly well built and very nice buildings, that those be reused on island as year-round housing. So being willing to subsidize the move and relocation and basically being willing to facilitate that will, I think, be a benefit over the long run. And I've talked a little bit recently with Housing Nantucket, and it sounds like they're doing a ton of that moving of donated houses. And so thinking through what other opportunities exist either on our property now or on properties in the future. And I think those are the obvious ones that I've come up with, none of which I think are new ideas. I would definitely say that the conservation restrictions came out of the Martha's Vineyard trip, and I see that as worthwhile. But other than that, I'm all ears, and I do see that Penny has her hand up.
Of course I do.
Just so you know, this is my pros and cons for the conservation restrictions, and then I was just going to say thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Do you have a question, Penny?
Oh yeah, okay. I was just going to share a couple of things. One of the I was on the trip to the vineyard for the Nantucket Land Trust, and one of the things that's different, of course, between the Martha's Vineyard Commission and the Cape Cod Commission and the NPNEDC is that Martha's Vineyard and the Cape, those commissions have regulatory powers, and our NPNEDC, when formed, did not.
Yes.
Because there was no way this community was going to pass that if it had regulatory power.
Right.
This was on the heels of the Kennedy bill, failed Kennedy bill. We saw, I think it was four different developments there. Some were older, some were still under construction. One of the things that struck me on that trip to the vineyard was one development we saw, Rachel, it was the one that was ownership, and it was 33 acres that the land bank owned, and they gave, I thought it was 8 acres to the homes that were constructed for ownership, but they were willing to use some of their rest of the 33 acres for infrastructure and utilities, such as the massive shared septic system. And I thought that was interesting and clever. I would also imagine, given the figure you hear thrown around here of what's still potentially developable without being reuse developed, is between 3 and 4% on Nantucket. So I would imagine with the Nantucket Islands Land Bank being focused on acquisition and maintenance, that the acquisition piece of that is going to have to shift at some point. And I very much appreciate everything that you just said, and am fully enthusiastic about collaboration in whatever form that takes going forward. So I think it's a very exciting time for a number of these nonprofits. and let's see what we can do. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Benny.
much.
Rachel, first and foremost, thank you for coming today and kind of reviewing some of these things. I'll say that it's been a pleasure working on some of the transfer fee advocacy things with you and at various panels. And the support of the land bank has been greatly appreciated by this board and office. The other things on the list are all incredibly exciting that you bring up and talk about, whether it be municipal housing opportunities, and other collaborations through CRs and such. So thanks for being here today, and thank you to your board for sending you here today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I just want to reiterate what Penny just said, which is that I think it's really exciting times, and I think there's a lot that can be accomplished, and I appreciate the commission's support in this, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and continuing to explore opportunities and, see which ones we can see through to fruition.
Yes.
Awesome. With that, any other members of the board, any questions, comments for Rachel, thoughts? I know we still have a little bit more to go here and some very patient presenters. So Rachel, I don't want to cut you short, but we are going to move on.
Totally fine. That's
Awesome.
great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, moving to WPI. Are you guys ready to jump in, or do you want to lead in, Dylan? Or
Well, just as I said during the
oh wait, I'm sorry. Before you do, Forrest put his hand up real quick. Let me jump to him before I change topics.
Oh, thank you, Sully. I'm sorry to interject. I just wanted to let the board know that in about 12 minutes, I do need to excuse myself. So should I quietly excuse myself in about 12 minutes, or should I hop off now before the next agenda item?
No, I think this is, if you want to hear what WPI and then drop off whenever you're ready. Understanding you probably have a class to get to.
Okay, thank you very much, Sully.
Okay. All right, with that, to you guys, WPI.
Yeah, I was just gonna, we made the announcement at the start. I won't take up too much time, but their final presentation will be next week on the 9th. So this is preliminary findings, and excited to hear what they have to share.
All right, yeah, I'm going to share my screen here.
And we'll start.
Yep.
All right. We are. Thank you for having us again. We are a group of students from WPI. We're working on a project looking at adaptive reuse of upper story spaces in downtown Nantucket. This is our preliminary findings and recommendations. I'm Elias Hanford.
I'm Jacob Boyle.
I'm Caleb Corpuz. And I'm Sean Smith.
For this project, we were looking at evaluating the usage of upper story spaces in a portion of the commercial downtown, which is shown in the map in red. It's around 160 parcels, and we were looking at converting underused second story spaces in that area to affordable or attainable year-round housing. For this, we were looking at the use status and usage type for each story of each building, and we also did interviews with property owners, business owners, town officials, and related experts, which are shown in the table, the types and how many for each one, to get more information about potential barriers to these sorts of conversions. As well, we sent out a survey to property owners and business owners to get some more information about their opinions on these conversions. For the usage, we were able to find data for around 95% of the second story space, and most of that was utilized, but we were only able to find data for around a third of the third story space.
We designated each floor of the parcels into 5 broad categories based on their primary use as shown here. We group them as commercial businesses, so retail, offices, or restaurants, hotels, cultural, which is museums, theater, event spaces, or public buildings, housing, and empty. We found that 78% of the units were used for commercial purposes and only 3% of them were empty, with all but one of the empty units having been recently or currently under construction. On the first floor. On the second floor, we found that 41% of the units were employed for commercial uses, with 34% of the units being used for housing. However, calculating by square footage, it's more of an equal distribution among commercial, cultural, hotel, and housing. And for the third story, for the units we do know, 50% of them were used for housing, equating to about 30% of the gross area. This, along with the large amount of space that is used for hotels, means that most of the area and number of units are used for residents of some kind. Bring up more of the specifics of the commercial uses. We split those between office, retail, restaurant, or storage. Offices were the most prevalent type, but there was also an amount of storage spaces. And while offices, retails, and restaurants are core to the business's function, storage utilization varies to how significantly the business uses it, meaning that there could be the possibility of conversion of those spaces. As for the third floor, the amount of commercial space we had was very minimal. Now for residential use, we split those between hotel and housing. Housing being made up of seasonal and short-term rentals, as well as employee housing. Housing would require very little alteration to become year-round housing, as they already are used for people living in those spaces for periods of time. And for third story, it's made up of a lot of hotel spaces, as hotels are usually use all of the space that they have in their building.
So in terms of some of the physical constraints and costs associated with conversion that we looked at, one thing that we made notice of is whether a space is already finished or whether it's an unfinished space. So in the second stories, about 95% of the square footage is already finished space. That's not too surprising given the high utilization rate. Finished spaces obviously can be better for a conversion if little work has to be done, but on the other hand, it can actually be more of a hindrance if a lot of alteration would be necessary to add a kitchen or something like that. It could just be easier to start fresh with an unfinished space. So that comes into play a little more with the third stories. Only about 62% of the third story square footage is finished space. This is likely a lot to do with the fact that many of the third story spaces are classified in some form as an attic or a half story or something like that. So it's just not as likely to be a finished space. Additionally, so obviously cost is a major concern. You mentioned earlier discussing how expensive it is to create any new unit of housing. Basically every single person we talked to brought this up as their principal concern before saying anything else. But another thing to just note is that the actual construction process as well can be pretty disruptive. So business or property owners could lose additional money while attempting a conversion if they have to shutter their business to allow for that construction to happen, which means that businesses that operate seasonally out of these buildings could be in a unique position to kind of fit that construction in at a time when they already are not operating.
So some additional concerns that stakeholders brought up were a bit of extra risk and liability to having tenants above businesses. Like, for example, if an upstairs tenant were to like set off the fire alarm, both the tenant and the business would have to evacuate, leading to kind of lost business time. Additionally, some businesses we talked to highlighted the importance of employee housing to them, which could make some businesses less willing to convert spaces into year-round housing versus something like employee housing. So some of our major conclusions were that most second story space is utilized. A lot of this upper story space is housing, but most of them were like STRs rather than year-round. Additionally, many of the third story spaces are still unknown to us. We weren't able to get as much information on that. And the biggest barrier seems to be cost. It was a concern that was consistently brought up, whether it's just physical conversion of the space or if converting actively utilized space were to be considered, the lower revenue that renting year-round would bring compared to current utilizations. So based on that, some of our preliminary recommendations are to explore some financial incentives, whether it's like something like, historic rehabilitation tax credits and commercial conversion tax credits. We also recommend looking into aggregating multiple unit constructions together into one project for the sake of grant applications, as some of these existing incentives targets larger scale projects, or on the other hand, just looking at creating just new incentives for something more suitable for this scale. Additionally, we also recommend doing some community outreach about incentives and just general opinions on converting STRs into year-round housing, specifically in the downtown area. And we also recommend researching possible locations where the town could collaborate with an owner to kind of show off like a proof of concept of this project. So some of our recommendations to kind of continue this research is to gather more utilization info on third stories to see if there's any potential there, or to kind of expand the area of research, whether it's looking at kind of like the outer areas of downtown or expanding to different areas in the island, such as like the commercial mid-island.
Thank you for listening, and are there any questions?
Penny's got her hand.
Penny's got a question. Go ahead, Penny.
Oh, thank you, you guys. This is really easy to understand the way you did this. I have one question, which is there are lots of areas here that I would consider downtown that weren't included, like that whole corner of Broad and Easy. And did you just use CDT, commercial downtown zoning? Was that your parameter?
So partially when we originally were given this project, we discussed with Dylan about what would be a feasible area for us to look at in the time we had. So this was overall it's a 14-week project. Half of that time was us being spent here. So we just kind of had to set an area to start looking at so that we could gather good data about a certain area rather than kind of spreading ourselves very wide and not ending up being able to collect much, actual substantive information by spreading that out.
So
Dylan, do you want to expand on that?
It's sort of, you just chose an area because you wanted to limit what you were doing?
Dylan,
go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, I think just to provide a little more color, the kind of guidelines we gave them was the 4 brick corners to kind of so they could really become experts on a restricted area. But I think one thing they touched on, and maybe you guys can shine a little more light on this, is that some of their recommendations are around kind of expanding out what would be considered for second story adaptive reuse or tertiary adaptive reuse in commercial spaces beyond just that immediate commercial district.
Okay, my last comment is the cost to bring some of these second or third spaces up to today's building code would be significant.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. I didn't mention that, but that was another concern that was brought up by a couple of people, especially changing the use, significant use status of a building can trigger the Chapter 34 reviews through the building code, and then it gets ridiculous having to bring, different parts, putting sprinklers in the basement if you're converting the second story or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
accessibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any other questions that we can answer? Additionally, the slides that we presented here are updated compared to what's in the packet. So if anybody wants those, let us know and we can send the updated versions, and more information will be provided and other recommendations at our presentations next week.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brooke.
I suggest you send them to staff so that the packet that stays online into the future actually reflects the ones you used.
Okay.
So they can update the packet.
Yeah, we'll send it over to you, Dylan.
It was very interesting, and I think it's something that we've bandied about, this notion, and to now have a sense of like what is even possible. Is it worth pursuing as a for program design or funding or or not, right? Because there isn't. And I think having more details on actually what is that third floor space look like in terms of height limitations. Right. Is it even having any potential
you
for
mentioned that to me.
Housing units?
Yes.
Because
With your space.
We can't throw dormers on historic buildings the way you would in another community to create headroom.
I think to that point, having this thorough study, and congratulations guys, you did a great job. What we look to Mid-Island, as Mid-Island redevelops and changes, maybe the group that follows you in the future tackles that zone and district to make recommendations of how we work with the zoning code as it exists, because we have some opportunities with bonuses on affordable or year-round units, and what do they look like moving forward. Yeah, we've got height bonuses. So this creates an amazing baseline based on what you started and did, and it's very
and a process.
Yeah.
The analysis, yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And we have a full report that we'll do as part of the college credit for this, but that goes into a lot more specific details and numbers and stuff like that. So you guys also will be able to find that online. We'll send the link to Dylan once it gets posted, but before we head out in a couple weeks. But you can find that digitally.
Cool.
I just want to say, I think like one thing we talked about when we were meeting with them is that if done right, their work was going to create a lot more questions than answers, and those would be questions that we could pursue. And I think they did it right, and that we have a lot of stuff to both dig into and continue to pursue. And I would encourage everybody to come on at 1:20 on the 9th to see the final presentation.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Number 9, discussion regarding expansion of income restriction limit to 250 AMI under seasonal communities designation.
Staff would be okay with the motion to continue to the 16th.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to continue?
So moved.
Okay. And I'm looking for a second.
I second it.
Thank you, Brooke. So we'll move that to, do we need a vote on that? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Yeah, well, you have to do
Okay.
roll call.
You need to do a roll call? Brooke Moore?
Aye.
Penny Dye?
Aye.
Who's still on?
Abby.
Abby De Molina?
Aye.
Chantal Murphy? I think we got an...
You're muted, Chantal.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. We got you, thank you. And Brian Sullivan's not.
Okay.
Is that it? We're good? Okay, moving to, where am I? Board comments? Any board comments? I'll put in a quick board comment. Dylan made an excellent presentation to the Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, which is online and available, and has some great slides and is worth seeing and distributing.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, it was a good joint presentation together.
You did all the hard work. Okay, moving on from that one. Any other board comments? None. Other business? What's on other business? Meeting December 10th, 12:30, remote only, not in this room. Penny, I apologize for changing your location today, my bad. And then Tuesday, December 16th, we'll be back in this room, hybrid.
And I'll just note, I'm sorry, there's a typo. It's Wednesday, December 10th, not Tuesday, December 10th. So it is
Okay.
the Wednesday.
Great. With that, we'll look for a motion to adjourn regular session, not to return for the purpose of executive session where,
For the items stated in the agenda.
for the item stated in the agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Brooke. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Penny. Vote by roll call. Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Abby De Molina. Penny Dye.
Aye. I'm sorry, I said aye, but I was
No problem.
muted.
Thank you. Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. Great.
Great.
So now we'll adjourn online to rejoin
Yeah.
an executive session. Thank you to everybody who joined us here.
Y'all have to leave, bye.
Now you, that